and management. All right, ready to hear that? It's recording now. Yeah, a little bit about me. I guess I came to Allegheny Mountain Institute in 2017, originally from the metropolis of Partyville, Wisconsin, which is a small town north of Madison, Wisconsin. It's a real name. But yeah, I came here in 2017, 2018, helped launch the AMI Farm and Augusta Health. During that year, we built a 16 by 30 foot greenhouse out of PVC, which is typically used for, like plumbing. But yeah, we built one and it lasted for 2 years. And it's honestly, of all astonishing things that I've accomplished at Augusta Health, that's probably number one, is that greenhouse actually didn't fall over. So I've gone from the best into the worst, or worst to the best, not worst, but like worst to the best. Now we have a 30 by 48 top line greenhouse with all bells and whistles that we'll discuss a little more on. But yeah, before we get into it, it's curious about where everybody else is from. If you want to throw it in the chat box and what you're looking to kind of gain out of this class, would be helpful to help guide our conversation. I don't think so. No. Cool. Thank you for those. I'm losing it. Bear with me with technology. It's a little hectic. All right. Cool. Before we get into any kind of design or size wise, what I'd ask yourself is, what are you looking to gain out of your greenhouse? What are you looking to, what are your goals? Are you a farmer looking to grow seedlings for your field like we are here? Are you just a home gardener looking to kind of, have a nice, really place of respite and to grow seedlings? Kind of sitting down and thinking through what exactly you're looking to get out of your greenhouse before thinking about design and management of it, because that'll help really guide these next few slides here. So another thing to consider, next slide, Kim. All right, family veggies. Another thing to consider, like what kind of budget you're working for. You can get the top of the line, glass greenhouse, which is going to be like the most expensive budget, or you can use use seedlings, or use plastic, which is going to be your cheapest option, and probably most common these days. But yeah, those are some of the goals to think through, and that'll help. Like, if you're like right here in our space, we have a 30 by 48 greenhouse that serves a 1.1 acre market garden, which honestly is a little big, but in our context, we are looking, just why I designed it that way. It's because our future of this project is going to double and triple ideally in space. So we want to be bigger. And there are many uses for a greenhouse, whether not just seedlings or, transplants, baby plants, but also like if you want to, a greenhouse can be defined pretty much as something I'd find it as something you heat with something on that propane or something not as natural as the sun. So you can grow heat-loving plants in March. That's definitely an area. So next slide, Kim. Okay, so there's some key elements we're going to think through when we're thinking about design of our greenhouse. There's multiple styles that we're going to go through. Orientation, which way you should face it, east, west, north, south. Size. Heating options, including like propane, natural gas, passive solar, coverings, cost and installation, and kind of like sustainability and what you're kind of looking for in the long run. So, all right. So the first design that is common, we included 4 common designs. There's multiple, but the kind of 4 most common that I can think of. One's a lean-to greenhouse. This is definitely going to prohibit your space. Like if you have a building to build off of, obviously the cost is going to be a little different because you just have a 3-sided greenhouse versus a 4-sided one. But this is where you get a lot of, like, if you're thinking like passive solar, if you have a existing building, the back of that greenhouse in this picture looks like stone, so that's heating up during the day and will give off that heat at night. And if you're looking to design a lean-to greenhouse, you definitely want to make it on the southern facing side of your building. So yeah, I think the most limiting factor to the lean-to is just like how much space you have to work with, like if it's just the side of a garage or, yeah, but it's good for existing structures. So. This is a standard hoop house, which is going to be your most like cost-effective building. It's just neat. It should be your most cost-effective, structure to put up is going to be your hoop house. Essentially, it's just a big circle. Not going to be your most durable, but definitely is going to be your cheapest. Yeah, and it's it's very easy to do. We have a few hoop houses out on our farm here that we built ourselves comfortably, and that's something to think through too as well. Is like who's gonna, are you gonna install it? What's the cost of the person installing the greenhouse? This is probably the most standard kind of size in the industry, in the farming industry right now. It's the Gothic style greenhouse, has that point at the top. This is the best for snow load. So, here in Virginia, in northern climate, you're going to want to prepare for your snow. Like what kind of weather are you dealing with? That's another big thing to consider when you're thinking about what greenhouse design is, like what's the snow load capacity of your structure. And Gothic style greenhouses are going to be your best bet for that climate. These are gutter connected greenhouses. These are more like industrial. When you hear about industrial greenhouses, people having huge like acres of greenhouses, what you'll see in this picture, there's no like break in these tunnels. It's all one big area, but these are connected by just a gutter system that helps with drainage, allows for a lot more space. But yeah, mostly used on an industrial scale. I just wanted to throw that one in there. All right. So now we kind of have your design figured out. There's some more things considered with how to orient your greenhouse. And once you have your design, the way I like to think about style is if you're a home gardener, I would say like an 8 by 6 foot greenhouse is going to be sufficient for like your home garden, unless you have a very, very large home garden. If you're just looking to start like transplants, in our previous slide, we did a 16 by 30 foot greenhouse for like a one acre kind of semi-professional market garden. And then if you're looking for beyond that, like more like in the transplant world, like a 30 by 48, larger greenhouses for larger space. Again, going back to your goals, what are you looking to gain out of the space is what kind of we're going to recommend. But there's things to consider. Lighting. So when you think about where you're placing your greenhouse, what's going to block the sun? It's all about the sun. You want to maximize, your sun input. So if there's a structure like a tree or another building that's going to block or shade out your sun, you're going to want to consider that. Also with shade, you want to consider where, what is your greenhouse going to shade? As a farmer, I'm always considering that we have a lot of structures on our farm. So, east and west kind of facing greenhouse is going to shade more north. So we got to consider what areas of our farm is going to be shaded if we put a structure up. And going off that the east and west direction of your tunnel is going to be maximizing your daytime sun. So it's going to be capturing and heating up your tunnel a lot faster than north and south facing sun during the day. But at night, the north-south facing greenhouse is going to capture more afternoon sun, which is going to help with heat retention during the evening. So. Cool. Then once we have your style, your design, kind of placement, you want to get into coverings. Again, things to consider with coverings is light emission. So, there's various coverings we're about to go through, but they have, each let light in a different capacity, and that's very important for the transplants you're growing. I think the next slide, Kim has it's RValue, which is a term used to explain how well materials keep heat from passing through. Like, most R values of a home with insulation are like rated at R30, which is really high. Where most greenhouses, R value of, in between like 0.8 and 2 is really good. It's like pretty standard and good. and the struggle with that is when you're thinking about, you're like, well, why is a home, I was asking myself, like, why is a home so well insulated? It's because we're not trying to let light in, it's like that mix between letting light into it and like keeping heat. And that's very important. The R value is very important for like to consider, is because like how much money you're going to spend on heat at night, to like heat your greenhouse versus versus like just having a low R value, a cheap option might not be as cheap as you think it is, because if you have a cheap plastic on your greenhouse, but you're heating with propane, that propane cost might offset getting like polycarbonate, for instance. And we're gonna go over all those here soon. Another thing to consider is cost. I just mentioned how much you're willing to pay on your covering. Installation, which is a big one. Like what do you do you want to install it yourself? A few of the coverings are a little bit more difficult to like, maneuver versus like plastic's really easy to install as like yourself. And then again, sustainability, how often, like how much plastic do you want to be using and how often do you want to replace it? So there's pretty much 4 main greenhouse plastic or greenhouse coverings. The most common is going to be your greenhouse plastic. It's used to cover pretty much the entirety of your greenhouse. It's going to be the cheapest option. You could actually buy a greenhouse inflation. Oh yeah, sure. And again, if you have questions, please just type them in the chat and we'll field them. We can see them too. So, anyway, the greenhouse plastic is probably your cheapest option. It comes in like 6 or 8 millimeter thickness, that's what it measures, is 6 mil and 8 mil. And that's what we pretty much standard use. It's it's like I said, the cheapest option. And if you cover 2 layers, it's a little like 2 layers of plastic, and you can buy inflator, so you can inflate 1 layer to make kind of like a bubble. And that adds to going back to our R value, it'll double that. So 1 piece of 8 mil plastic has an R value of 0.8, but if you get 2 pieces and inflate it like a pillow, it's going to add double that. So it'd be 1.6. And that's going to help with all heating costs and whatnot. So downside of the greenhouse plastic is it's going to fade over time. And you're going to want to replace every 4 or 5 years, which obviously is, plastic. There's enough plastic in this world. So, but it's going to be your most cost effective and easiest to install, which is a benefit for it. And then there's a solo wrap, which we don't have a picture of, but it's essentially what I described. It's solo wrap is thick plastic in between. If you can imagine bubble wrap, kind of like bubble wrap 2.0, it's what your solo wrap's going to be. It's a little more difficult to install, but it's a lot more like heavy and dense. It has a really good R value, but it's very, very expensive and hard to install. You'd have to probably hire somebody to do it on a big scale. I'm sure you can figure it out like in a smaller greenhouse. And then glass. Glass has been like the most historically used covering for greenhouses before the invention of plastic. It's definitely be the best like light emission, like you're gonna get the best like growth out of your plant. And when I'm talking about light emission, it's like when you have plastic over your greenhouse, it's gonna dim that light coming in, and your plants are gonna want to photosynthesize. So if you imagine like something dimming, it's gonna photosynthesize and grow a little, I guess, less. Where like if it's glass, it's gonna emit really, really well, and that's where you have your best growth. However, it's wicked expensive to cover a greenhouse in glass, and it's not that great of an insulator, and and it's pretty fragile too. If it's one thing to poke a hole in the greenhouse plastic and patch it, but it's another thing to drop a glass on the floor and or drop some glass and shatter it. So anyway, and then we have polycarbonate, which is just a kind of flimsy plastic that it's pretty standard on greenhouses. It's really does really well. Honestly, probably the best bang for your buck is going to be in the long haul. It'll last a long time. It's a little difficult to install, but has really good light emission, has really good R value, and again, it's going to last 10 to 15 years. Nice. And it's it blocks UV rays, it's a good R value, a good insulator. But yeah, probably your best bang for your buck. Any questions on any of that? Sorry, I'm a fast talker and I like to run through it. So any questions on coverings or design or orientation? I know I kind of skipped through those fast, but nice, Darcy. Yeah, that's awesome. If you can find greenhouse salvage glass, old windows. Actually, we have some here on the farm. Yeah, that's a good way to go too. So cool. Great. And there's three main like heating options outside of some passive solar. Size versus covering considerations. Is that more cost is not an issue? Yeah, I would probably go with glass because it's just like cool. I don't know. Glass greenhouses are great. It's a lot like you can see out, like in my greenhouse right now with 2 double layers of plastic, you can't really see outside our tunnel very well. So it's a little more like pleasing, I would say. Size versus covering considerations, Alexandra. I'm wondering, I'm going to take a stab at kind of interpreting that like in like a 30 by 48. Yeah. Okay. No worries. It's, I mean, obviously the bigger the greenhouse is glass or the bigger they get, the more expensive it's going to be. So like, I would say like a glass, like if it's a really small greenhouse, you could probably find glass to salvage, like Darcy mentioned in her comment. But, if you're trying to do like a 30 by 48 greenhouse, all glass, again, it's hard because like if you're doing a freestanding greenhouse, it's going to be a little more difficult to build out of like, if you're going to do a glass greenhouse freestanding, a little more difficult to build. But yeah, I would say, I don't know, if you're building a small greenhouse, like a polycarbonate or something like it's, the cost goes extremely because the bigger the greenhouse, the larger the structure. So like your cost is going to increase a lot more, obviously, with that. So I recommend east-west orientation. And if I had, I've made one thing that I've had the luxury of doing here at the farm here is making a lot of mistakes and learning from them. So if I could redesign my greenhouse, you'd want to I think this is coming up here, but you think about like access and like doors and like ventilation and all this stuff we're about to get into. But one thing I would really do, we have it oriented east-west, but I would insulate the south side wall and I would insulate the east wall because that morning sun isn't really impacting your greenhouse as much. So when it goes over, when it gets to midday, you're not shading your plants, you have it insulated. It's just adding a lot of like, you want to maintain as much heat in there as possible, especially as like, if you're a small farmer or if you're trying to like cut costs down of heating, you don't want to insulate as much, as much as possible. So, but yeah. So now we got kind of our design. I think I skipped over a key point that I want to make with like access for me is like, what do you want to get? Like in my greenhouse with 30 by 48 tunnel with a 8 by 4 foot door, that's all we have to get in our greenhouse. And that was like the most annoying mistake I made because it's like, we can't even get a garden cart in there. Like I would get 2 8 by 4 sliding doors on either end to one, aerate the greenhouse and two, have complete access to where you're like, what you want to get in. Like you get a tractor in there, you can get your garden carts in there. You could drive your truck in there if you wanted to, it's like just think about a scenario that you want to, just dream up a scenario you want to do in your greenhouse and like, just make sure you have access for it. So that's one mistake that I've made that I really learned from. So, cool, rambling. But anyway, the heating options under a greenhouse, these are the three main ones. Obviously there's a lot of passive solar, which we're about to talk about, but we're gonna go into benefit, positive, negative. Natural gas is gonna be your cheapest option. Then the only thing about natural gas is that if you don't have a line running through your area or like close to where your farm or property is, you're not gonna be able to, it's gonna be very expensive to like access your natural gas because you have to tap into the line. So most heating options are with like farmers I know is with propane. Definitely a little expensive, but yeah, obviously it gets the job done. We have all of our greenhouses on propane and on thermostats that when it dips below a certain temperature, our big propane heater would kick on. And then, at 50 degrees, we're maintaining at night right now. And we're getting that in a bit, but like that's heating. We don't have to worry about it. That's something I've heated with electric space heaters before, inside of a tunnel on a thermostat, which a thermostat is just something that, monitors, obviously it monitors the temperature in our greenhouse. And when it dips below or above, it'll kick on. So then you have wood stoves. So it's living with wood stove. It heats up well at night. You can keep it going, but if you're not able to keep it going throughout the night, it's going to obviously cool down. What I would do is if I could have a wood stove and propane and like offset your costs with just like heating wood stove up at night and letting it burn out and then have the propane kick on once the heat stove couldn't maintain its temp, then that'd be a way to like, if you have access to a lot of wood or any kind of carbon, for instance, that'd be a way to like offset your costs. Limitations of sticking with passive solar, and I think we're about to get into this next slide, but is that you're relying, as a like professional farmer, it's like you want that, like your plants really crave constant temperature. Like they don't want to fluctuate. Like it's like, so if you're relying on passive solar or wood stove for instance, it's gonna dip a lot. So you're not gonna be able to maintain your temperature at 50 degrees if it's -6 outside at night. It's like you probably can, there are ways to like be close to that. Definitely. I wouldn't, as someone like professionally doing it, I wouldn't want to rely solely on passive solar, but on a home garden scale, not going to be a huge deal if it your lettuce heads dip below 40 degrees, one night. But like for us, we want to maintain constant quality, and like that's like super important for me. Anyway, here's some passive solar ideas. Geothermal is using the Earth's kind of core to heat and cool your greenhouse. It's quite the process to do, but honestly, something I wish we would look a little more into when designing my greenhouse here. You can have an active compost pile in or out of your greenhouse. Compost piles can heat up to be 160, 170 degrees. So, I've seen farmers who run water lines on their active compost pile outside their greenhouses, and the water line runs underneath and kind of combines the geothermal. I've also seen people have active compost piles inside their greenhouse. Obviously, smell can be an issue depending on what you're using. But those are ways to like actively. That's something I'm very interested in, is like having an active compost pile and capturing that heat off of that. You can fill up black barrels with water, and that's going to heat up during the day during the sunshine, and then should release at night. You can, finding spaces for that kind of stuff. Like, if you have a greenhouse with, you have tables, you can use them. You can use black barrels as legs. I guess the downside of that would be, trying to change out the water. And imagine it getting very grody throughout the year or years as it sits in there. So, and mass in general, and then black barrels kind of go with this, but mass, like having stones, like, walking steps or, raised beds, or just having mass in your greenhouse that heats up during the day, it's going to radiate at night. It's going to help, keep your greenhouse warm. And thermal blankets, if you're a gardener or farmer, you're familiar with like row cover, which is going to be like what you cover your plants with at night to keep them warm and keep frost off. Thermal blanket is very popular in China. They just cover their entire greenhouse, which honestly I'm very fascinated by. We haven't done, but they just like have very heavy blankets. They cover their whole greenhouse with, and they take it off during the day. So it's a nighttime they cover it up, and they take it off during the day. So I don't know. I haven't had a whole lot of experience with that, but I'm very fascinated by it. Cool. Just want to stop for questions on any passive solar or heating questions before we get into watering and temperature control. Here, I thought I had to fly through this class, and I think we're doing well. All right. So there's two kind of key aspects of managing a greenhouse. You got your watering, which you're watering your plants, and then you have temperature and air control throughout your greenhouse. So, and we'll get into watering right away. So. There's pretty much two ways to water. You have your hand watering, which is like, either with a spigot and a hose, or you have your overhead automation, which is what is shown here. Overhead automation is really well for like just maintaining consistency. You can set up, there's watering systems that you can set up that you can set a moisture temperature or a moisture gauge of like, let's say 50% moisture in your soil. And when it drops below 50%, you can have overhead water things hooked up to your to a hose, and it kicks on and waters until it reaches the ideal, which would be like 90 or 100%. But I've never used it. I'm a very observant. I like to be kind of like more in tune with the plants. So I've always just done hand watering. The biggest thing to kind of think about when watering is consistency. You don't want to go in there with like, have brand new little seedlings come in there and just like full blast, just blast away at your seedling. It's that splashback of the water is gonna water to soil is gonna cause disease on your plants, even in the greenhouse. So like a nice gentle like watering, especially of young seedlings. The most common mistake I've made and I see make is actually overwatering. I think as humans and trying to care for plants, we're like, we just need more water, we need to water them. But it's not usually the case. And in general, I would say like most gardeners have that problem with like overwatering their plants. Like a plant doesn't need water. Seedlings need water every day. Like that's definitely, but like if you're like in the ground, does not need water every day. So that's like the most common mistake I see overall in farming and gardening. And on my farm right here, and it all depends on going back to the covering, how much light emission is coming through your greenhouse. It's not like on my tunnel, in my first years, we had a single piece of plastic over a tunnel, and I would water twice a day. Well, last year we had I grew in we have double plastic on our tunnel. It's inflated. And I was overwatering a lot, and I didn't understand why. And what the reasoning I came to is that there's 2 layers of plastic on this tunnel, creating less light emission coming through. Therefore, I don't need to, we didn't need to water as much as I used to. And some signs of overwatering are like, if you see I don't know, wish I could draw. Well, probably a good thing I can't draw on this thing. But if you see a seedling pop up on your watering and it's just straight up, there's no seed on it. There's no leaves. That's a sign. It's called what's it called? Dampening off, and that's a sign of overwatering. If you see a green algae forming on your potting soil, that's a sign of overwatering. I caution on watering. At our farm right now, especially during the spring and shoulder seasons, or spring and fall, which I call the shoulder seasons, we water once a day at 11 o'clock, and then we check at night if there's a dry table, if there's a dry tray. One sec, I'm gonna rewind myself. So here at the farm, we water everything through once a day. So through meaning we go through water gently, and it's like soaking through our trays. We want to make sure they're watered, and then at night we come back through and check, and we're like, okay, this tray, how the tray is looking? Quick glance. If a tray is more than 25% dried out, we will water that tray again. Just that tray, not all of it. That's how we operate here at the AMI Farm at Augusta Health. And another thing to consider when watering too is temperature. And like right now, we can't help it because one of our hydrants is outside, which is another thing to think about when thinking about access of your greenhouse. Is I wish we really would have put our hydrant inside of our greenhouse. We're watering with really cold water. And it's going to drop your soil temperature down. Like every morning we're watering, we're hitting like, young plants right now with like 40 or 50 degree water, and they're not happy. So, especially when you get into tomatoes and heat loving plants, make sure your water temperature, if you're wondering why something's not growing well, it's probably, again, your water temperature, like how much you're watering, what's the water temperature at. A thing that I used to do in the past, which we probably should start doing again, is putting, we have a backpack sprayer or some kind of jug or even a watering can in your greenhouse during the day, and then letting that heat up during the day, and then the next morning come in and water your tomatoes with that heated up water. That's going to really go a long way with your your plants. So yeah, I guess we can try next slide. I don't even know what's on here. Hand watering. Another, again, kind of got into hand watering a bit, but another thing to consider when you're watering is, I like to call my seedlings have like 3 stages. One's your babies when they first germinate, the first week or so. You don't want to go in there and just like blast them. It's like, you're going to disrupt your seeds. You're going to, they're not going to be happy. Just like very gentle water through and let them adapt. And then the other second stage is going to be like your, I don't know, toddlers, how about that? And you kind of like, you can be a little more like, a little more aggressive. It's like kind of get them used to the world, right? Parents out there. And then in the third stage is going to be your kind of teenage, young adult years, where you're like, you can just, full bore blast them and just get them out of there. They're about to get ready to go out in the world. So those are kind of my 3 stages of like watering in a greenhouse. So cool. Any questions on watering? Again, yeah, I guess just touch on like seed starting, like just a quick note on that. It's, maintaining moisture and heat on seed starting is a must, where you want to have, you want a proper heat, proper moisture retention on seed starting. That's going to go a long way if you're having troubles with like starting seeds. Think of my first 2, it's a little tangential, but my first 2 reasonings is like, how old is your seed and how much water, and like, what's the temperature? So that's 3. So just a quick note. Temperature control. Ideally what we do here, everything's on automated thermostats. So we have these fans that blow in and out of our greenhouse. And that's like, once it goes to, we'll get into it, once it gets like 75 degrees, our fan kicks on, starts aerating our greenhouse. You don't know, that's obviously ideal, but like before in the past, in like 28, when we had this, like what I call it, it's that PVC greenhouse that we had, we would just open doors and like aerate it that way. So if you have a home gardening greenhouse, you can figure out ways to just have access on both sides of your greenhouse, and just that'll be enough aeration. But you typically want to, ideally you have a thermostat that kicks on, that maintains your temperature, your heat temperature at night, and then your temperature during the day. So go to the next slide, Kim. And then one last note on the temperature controls. Always have backups. For instance, just for an example of something that I've learned, a mistake that we made is that we had a greenhouse that was just completely covered. We had an 8 by 4 foot door. It was all sealed. We just had exhaust fans on that ran off electricity. Well, during, I think it was either 2 years ago, during 2020, I came in one day and it was middle of June or July. We had our whole greenhouse was full of starts, and I pull in the driveway of our farm and none of the fans are on, and it's usually heated up by then. And I'm like, what's going on? And the electricity was off. So, and by 10, 11 o'clock on a June day, your greenhouse is going to heat up fast, like 90s and 100s real quick. So, and that's going to be detrimental to your plant. So I had to haul all of, because I didn't have a door, I couldn't drive a truck in my greenhouse. I had to haul them all out by hand. And we spent half the morning getting our seedlings out of our greenhouse because electricity went out. I learned that mistake, and last year we had roll-up sides installed. So, or if we would have had an access door on the other side, it would have been fine. But like, because we didn't have any access to our greenhouse, we couldn't aerate it naturally. So we installed roll-up sides last year, which is just like a roll-up curtain that rolls up and down on like a hand crank. So that's just something to consider as well. Just have a backup plan, especially for farmers. Cool. Air control. It's proper air control is critical for a lot of reasons, both for preventing disease on your plants. A lot of disease and pest problems, just in general, a general statement on growing is going to come from air control. So if you're, if you're growing underneath row cover in your fields, or if you're growing in a greenhouse and you're like got all this like stagnant air, like you can almost feel it, like the humidity in your greenhouse. It's like you want to have the air moving. Another thing you want to have moving is it for heat retention too. So at like night, when like we have a heater that just blows hot air, well, it's just going to like blow hot air in that one spot. We want that heat to circulate throughout the greenhouse, because we want to maintain that temperature throughout the year, or throughout the night, throughout the entire greenhouse. And one way to do that is with horizontal airflow fans. They're called HAF fans. That's what's pictured here. You'll see them in most common green. There's circulating air constantly, helping with disease prevention. The roll-up sides that I mentioned, that's a way for us to, on all of our infrastructure, is the aerator tunnels. And then our exhaust fans that we just have fans. You can see actually in that picture in the back, in the far back, not the fan, but in the far back, it's an example of an exhaust fan. So when that temperature heats up in that greenhouse, that fan will open and it'll be blowing air from one end to the other. So any questions on air control, watering, yeah, anything like that? Oh. So temperature control. Yeah, so when you think about temperature control in a greenhouse, I think the next slide has more of the info, Kim, too. Oops, here we go. Here we go. I have Pat's rules here for temperature control. You want to think about, when you think about like ideal daytime temperatures in a greenhouse, you want to think about plant specific. So it's not, ideally, for growing tomatoes, we want to have it 80, 85 in our greenhouse, but our brassicas are not going to, our broccoli, our cabbage, our kohlrabi are not going to like that, because they're cool at loving. So the happy medium for me is ideal temperatures for all plants, 70 to 75 degrees in your greenhouse and 50 degrees at night. In general, cooler weather crops are like cooler temperatures. So your radishes and turnips and broccoli and cabbage and all your like lettuce, all the spring and fall stuff that you think of, that's all gonna like cooler temperatures inside your greenhouse, where like, your peppers and tomatoes and eggplant are gonna like hotter temperatures. There's ways to help with that. You can set it at 70, 75, but they make like, I don't know if you're familiar with heating mats, which I didn't put on this PowerPoint, but they're like mats that you can set the temperature of what your soil wants to be, because that's also a big factor of growing plants, is what's your soil temperature at. So by setting at 70, 75, we have young tomato plants. We'll put them on a heating mat that actually heats the soil up to 85 degrees. So there are ways around to like work within your greenhouse, and that's what we do. So again, not to get too into the weeds of that, but typically 70, 75 during the day, 50 at night. If you're not growing tomatoes or peppers or anything, like 45, 40 at night would be fine. It's all, again, going back to like what you're looking to gain and control, like, even your tomatoes would live fine at 40 or 45, 50 degrees. It's just that we're looking to like, maximize your, the gain of tomatoes, because there's a lot of information out there that if you do dip below like 45 degrees on a pepper tomato plant, it's going to affect it's not just, they're not all just like created equal. They're like, these little tomato plants are not like, if they're like disturbed at any stage in their life, it's going to affect their like output. So that's something to consider as well. Like one thing I've always like stood by is a healthy, your healthy plant doesn't just like, it's like going to the grocery store and buying a cucumber. You're not just buying, you can buy an organic cucumber, you can buy, a conventional cucumber. It's just like growing. It's like, there's health benefits of buying both of those, but like same thing with seedlings. Like if you buy a bad looking cabbage plant, it's just gonna attract pest bugs, and it's gonna be a bad cabbage plant. You want a healthy cabbage plant. If you're going to grow a healthy plant, that's going to turn into a healthy product. So anyway, yeah, rant over. But yeah, where to get started? One question I always ask, and every time I've taught this class twice now, 2-3 times, and I ask myself a lot: do you need a greenhouse? Do you need to do it? And the answer is no. You do not need a greenhouse at all. Like honestly, on a farming scale, you don't even need one. You can buy transplants, you can buy these, you can however much money you want to spend, and you can argue that it might be less cost effective to, like, as a farmer, to buy seedlings from a big greenhouse and plant them here. But it kind of like limits your freedom and limits your choice of what you want to grow. And that's something that we really hold dear. And I hold dear, is like, well, we want to grow a lot of different stuff. We don't want to just grow, red tomatoes. There's plenty of places to, source seedlings, not named Lowe's either. It can be, there's a lot of farmer places that sell, onion starts, and honestly, the possibilities are endless. But if you're looking to, upscale your greenhouse, there's a lot of, like, I think there's an info sheet coming up here, but there's a lot of information out there for like building your own on a home scale. And there's like, I'll type in the chat here after we finish on this. Like, if you're a farmer looking for, the greenhouses that we've really, I've worked with in the past. And if you're in the Shenandoah Valley here, I definitely have really good recommendations on who to contact for that. So, yeah, any questions? All right, happy to answer. Man. All right.
You can also take your speaker off mute and ask verbally if you wish.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool. I was wondering if you have any good resources for greenhouse maintenance. I manage a small greenhouse in Brooklyn, New York, and that's been, for me, the most difficult learning curve. Is I just have to fix things when they break, because I don't always know what I'm supposed to be paying attention to.
Yeah, do you have examples of greenhouse maintenance that you're looking for?
Yeah, I had a curtain part break because I didn't know I needed to be tightening the wire cables on the whatchamacallit, on the sorry, I'm losing the word, but the tension thing. Yeah, things like that, where it's just oh, if I just scrub this part of the heater every year, it would never break. Yeah.
I don't have any good resources for actual maintenance of the structure of your greenhouse. And honestly, just saying that, I'm man, we should probably be scrubbing our heater too, apparently. I don't have any good resources other than maybe I don't know. I guess I don't know if you have I don't know if you know who built it. What style greenhouse, or if you have any info, if it was a big company that built the greenhouse, and getting I would contact them and be hey, what's the best way to maintain?
Yeah, we've asked. They keep on just wanting us to contract it out.
Oh man, yeah, it's Remo or something.
That's not, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have any books or resources. I guess YouTube would be that's where I would start with, or Google. But yeah, sorry. Darcy Stanton just placed for organic plant starts around here. I guess I know Project Rose is a big plant start during the year, and then we might be looking into doing a little bit. We've sold a little bit to the local food drive-through in Stanton in the past. We're still hashing out what we're doing, but there might be some plant sales at the AMI Farm and Augusta Health as well. So outside that, farmers market, a lot of people sell plants there. So.
We started a new farm recently with Waynesboro Public Schools at Berkeley Glen, and I think they're looking to do a plant sale as well. So if you want to support a farm to institution, farm to school project, excuse me, you can look for plant sales with them in Waynesboro as well. Any other questions for Pat? Well, we can stay online for a few more minutes if anybody wants to ask, but we would just want to say thank you so much for everyone that joined us today and being interactive and learning about greenhouse design and management, as well as the Allegheny Mountain Institute. Please continue to check our website for future events. Hopefully we're getting back in person here for on-farm events, as well as continued education online. Our workshops are always free and open to the public. Of course, we are a nonprofit and appreciate donations. And so you're welcome to make a donation on our website. But we appreciate you coming. And if you want to stay and ask a few questions a little less formally, we can do that too. Thank you, everybody.
This is really cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.